This is a sealed booth where we do audiograms. Typically what happens is the person sits in the soundproof booth, puts on these headphones, and then somebody outside the booth will start the program for testing. It's either they run a pre-packaged program testing certain decibels of hearing, or they go ahead and test individual levels of hearing. And then when the patient will hear on either side, they usually hit this button and then it'll register on the audiometer. So an audiogram is important for finding out whether somebody has disease or not at certain or decibels. Usually as you get older, because of the three little bones in the ear that are attached to the eardrum, when you have arthritis, say in the joints, in the knees, in the back, you also have arthritis to the three bones. And when the bones are supposed to vibrate off of the vibrations that come in and hit the tympanic membrane of the eardrum, if there's arthritis, they won't vibrate as freely, and that's where you have the loss of hearing. It could also be, you can also have hearing loss from other brain problems, but that's typical. So when we have hearing problems, it's usually because of trauma. Trauma can be in the form of loud music, in the form of impact tools, also in the form of firearms. Our police officers have to get tested. I do tests on federal air marshals, and if there's a difficulty with hearing at a certain point, you cannot fly. With drivers, you cannot drive. So that's why it's very important for at least federal air marshals, police officers, firefighters, and people with DOT or cards that from the Department of Transportation. You have to have good hearing to protect you and to know about your surroundings. For the purposes of this video, it is important to protect your hearing. It's important to always wear hearing protection. For those of you who are firearms instructors or gun enthusiasts, or just competitive with shooting, it is important to always wear protection. I'll show you in a second how the difference is between the soft cushions, the ear muffs, and then the fancy in the ear hearing protection. Otherwise, sometimes there are things that you can do to help with hearing, such as taking omega-3 fish oil. This is aside from the protection. Preventing damage is number one. When you have damage, arthritis of any sort gets some relief with anti-inflammatories. Turmeric, glucosamine sulfate, omega-3 fish oil. When those are utilized already and you still have problems with hearing or dizziness, and I'll put a link to my dizziness lecture, sometimes ginkgo biloba has been shown to help as well. So I have a couple of examples of hearing protection, and then I'll show you exactly why I suggest hearing protection for everyone. These are foam inserts. They can be compressed by rolling them, and then they expand to fit into the canal of everybody's ear. They vary in sizes, but if you can compress them enough and fit them in, they'll fill up the ear canal with foam. And foam of about this length and this thickness, that's about an inch. That's about the average length of an external auditory canal. So if you get enough foam in there without irritating the eardrum, it should block out the majority of noise. But remember, gunshot, shotgun versus a handgun, or a drill press, or a large lathe, or a CNC machine, or even an engine. That can be from a car engine down to a lawnmower engine. Anything like that will cause impact to the ear, and I'll show you later how sound waves work. But the problem is the ear and its anatomical setup is built to take on sound waves and then interpret with the sound wave that hits it, interpret the pitch and the decibels and the sound that's coming to it. The problem is if you have an overabundance of sound waves or pressure wave, you can actually destroy that delicate structure. So this is okay for nighttime and for casual. So those of you, especially my people who practice target shooting, those of you who are only relying on those two things, they're cheap, but you could wind up having damage to the ears. And my people who work in factories with loud machinery, although those are available for you by the industry, I usually find that after about 5 to 10 years, there is hearing damage. And then we have to document how bad it is, and we try protection when we find it. But by that time, the arthritis in the ear bones is already set in. It's just a matter of time before it gets worse. So I suggest moving on to better hearing protection. These are standard ear muffs. They protect hearing. They give you a better seal around the ear, and then they're padded so the sound doesn't get through. The plastic is thick, and then the plastic has foam inserts in it, and then you have foam around the padding that sinks into the ear. So it's usually custom made. It gives you a little bit of a spring, so the muffs are constantly being pushed and given a good seal. Now, that's better than ear foam, but it's still not that great. So the only problem with these is you have to walk around holding them. I've seen some guys do this on their helmets or put them on their helmets, and it gets to be annoying, I guess, after a while. But they are better as far as protecting the ear from chronic damage. Some of my hunters, especially turkey, pheasant, duck hunters, will use, because they have protection while they're hunting, and they like to hear their fellow hunters. So these are electronic earmuffs. They are made to block out sound, or at least high percussion sound, but they allow soft voice at lower decibels to get through. And you can change the sensitivity depending on what you want with the dial-in. It's just like the other one, the other earmuffs, where it's spring-loaded, so it applies a little bit of pressure to the area that cushions around the ear. There is protection in the form of plastic, and specifically there is foam. But there's also a speaker in both sides that will allow small, low decibel sound waves, which is voice, to come on through and be transmitted through the hard plastic. It's usually through this little tiny foam microphone. Better because you don't have to constantly take it on and off. You do have a little bit of a cutout every time if you're talking to someone and you're listening to them speak. If there's a sudden impact sound in the background, the speech gets cut off. So it takes a little bit of getting used to. But if you have to wear these things in the long run, it's easier to communicate with your staff or your other hunters. The final things, these are expensive. Most industry can't afford giving these to everybody, so it's usually on your own. These are cheap. You can get them just like safety glasses at any hardware store or gun shop. These you'll probably have to find at a gun shop or online. The most protection you can get are customized. These are sport ears. They're customized. You have to actually get molding of the external auditory canal from an ear doctor. You send it into this company, and they actually make the same speaker system that's in here is made for these small inserts. So not only do you have customized fitting of hard plastic that does not allow much sound waves through the ear canal, but you also have a very small speaker that will only allow, depending on how sensitive you dial up or dial down, only allow, again, low decibel, low impact sound wave to get through. So you can actually keep this in. You don't have to worry about anything draped around your neck. You can get these comfortable enough so that they fit into the ear and they don't cause irritation. They won't cause any irritation to the eardrum. They're not sweaty. They're very easily hidden for those of you who have a reason to hide them, or you don't want to let anybody else know that you're wearing them. But they're also a bit expensive. That's the high end. So those are more for competitive shooters, competitive skeet shooters, shotgun or triple gun shooters, or police competitors. So that's from low to high, the ways you get protection. The reason, I'll show you on my illustration, the reason you have, or we like to protect, is that this is an ear, that's the external ear, this is the external auditory canal, where you're not supposed to put Q-tips, and then you have the eardrum at the base here. The eardrum is very, very delicate. It's almost like a thin piece of cellophane, And connected to it is one bone, another bone, and another bone. This last bone, of the three of them, this last bone is in contact with another very delicate translucent membrane that sits on something called the cochlea. This is just a rough schematic, but the cochlea takes the vibration. So sound waves come in, they hit the eardrum vibrates at a very fast speed. It vibrates this bone, this bone, this bone. It sends the vibrations all the way to the cochlea, and the vibrations in this cochlea stimulate, depending on how high or low the decibels are, different hair cells in this fluid-filled organ. And then depending on the vibrations and the impulse, it changes the movement of the sound waves and water or fluid in here to impulses, nerve impulses that go to the brain, and then your brain interprets different sources of sound. This is the semicircular canal that it's also connected to. That's more for balance, and I'll put a link to my vertigo talk. But all this works, and all these three tiny bones are very, very delicate. I've actually been in surgery where we replaced the stapes. That's the last one here. And there was a botch up in the surgery where the nurse dropped the stapes, this very small metal joint bone substitute, on the floor, and they had to get another one, and that was about $3,000. And I kept it. I don't know where it is, but I kept it. It's a microscopic, looks like a horseshoe. Microscopic little thing, looks like a horseshoe, and it just goes in when people have arthritis and they need replacement. They just take the current bone out, and they put the stapes connected to this bone, and then connect it to the cochlea. And then usually it's good to go, as long as the other two bones aren't damaged, and as long as the eardrum isn't damaged. So you can see it's almost like replacing a knee joint. It's the same concept, and just like arthritis in the knee joint, arthritis where you can't hear anymore because of old age usually will get benefit if you give something like glucosamine sulfate, omega-3 fish oils, turmeric if it's irritation to the muscles that tense these bones up. Believe it or not, depending on the impact of the sound wave, you'll actually have muscles to each of these bones that if the vibration is too great and there's going to be damage felt to the to the cochlea, there are muscles that tighten up and dampen the vibrations that occur with the bones. And those muscles can be irritated. That's where you have medicines like, herbs like turmeric or magnesium to help with, just like the muscles of the knee that you want loosened and supple, same thing with these muscles. And sometimes that helps with tinnitus or ringing in the ears. So this is the basics of why we want protection, because once you damage these bones, number one, it's very expensive. Number two, it's usually irreversible unless you have a lot of insurance and or coverage, and the surgeries that go with it aren't guaranteed. So the best medicine is preventive medicine, and preventing from chronic high-impact sound is the best way to avoid seeing a surgeon or having problems with difficulty in hearing. And I have a lot of older gentlemen who say, I don't need a hearing aid because I'm fine with reading lips. I'm fine with saying, huh? The problem there is not the person or the patient. The problem is there are social interactions that sometimes people don't want to hang out when they have to constantly shout. So you'll have less and less people interacting with the patient, and it usually causes a little bit of withdrawal from society. So there's a social stigmata with having difficulty with hearing. If worst case scenario, if there's other things that need to be done, you can see a hearing doctor for a hearing test, or go to one of us for the Booth test that I just showed you on the video and get a more specific diagnosis. Sometimes it is necessary to get an MRI as well to make sure it's not the brain as the source for the difficulty in hearing or dizziness.